They didn't fire me in a boardroom. They didn't accuse me in front of a jury. They did it with a whisper, a rumor that spread like wildfire before I even heard the first flame crackle. My name is Dr. Ryan Lancaster. I'm 40 years old, a double board-certified trauma and orthopedic surgeon in Los Angeles. Until 3 months ago, I was the director of surgical services at St. Gavin Medical Center, one of the most prestigious hospitals on the West Coast. Now I'm the man who might have done something inappropriate. That's what they're saying. No charges, no emails, no official complaint, just murmurs in the hallway, avoided glances, a sudden administrative leave, and a voicemail from HR that said, "Please don't return to the hospital until further notice. We'll be in touch." No explanation, no context, just silence. And silence is dangerous when you're a man in my position. You see, when you've built your reputation over 2 decades, when your name is tied to successful surgeries, grant funding, and national conferences, one false word can be all it takes to unravel everything. It started, I think, with a coffee, or more accurately, what was said over it. 2 weeks before the first wave hit, I had a tense meeting with Dr. Melissa Cohen, the new chief of medicine. She was brilliant, sure, but also political. She didn't like that I questioned her new budget reallocations or that I refused to approve a risky experimental protocol for a private donor's child. We argued, not screamed, not insulted. Argued professionally, sharply. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Because 1 week later, an anonymous staff member filed a concern about my behavioral conduct. Then a patient's family questioned a procedure I didn't even perform. But my signature had somehow appeared on the chart. Then my hospital badge stopped working. And just like that, I wasn't Dr. Lancaster, surgical chief and mentor to dozens of residents. I was a liability. But here's the thing, I didn't panic, because panic is noisy. And I knew if they were going to play this like a political chess game, I'd have to be the one who stayed silent long enough to turn the board. No, I wasn't going to yell or sue or go to the press. Not yet. I was going to watch and listen and prepare because they thought I would go quietly. But what they didn't know was I never leave quietly. The first thing I did was rent a private co-working office in downtown LA. Not too far from the hospital, but far enough that no one would accidentally run into me. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even my assistant, especially not her. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in 20 years of medicine, it was this. Leaks never come from strangers. They come from people who know you, people who smile at you in the elevator, people who say, "Let me know if you need anything," with a clipboard in their hand and a scalpel in their back pocket. I started digging. It began with the patient file, the one where my name had been mysteriously signed. I logged in through an old credential I still had access to, thanks to a software oversight. The metadata showed something fascinating. The digital signature had been added on a Sunday. I hadn't been in the building that weekend, but someone had logged into the system under my credentials at 4:17 a.m. And the IP address? It belonged to the residence lounge. I cross-referenced the badge entries for that time slot. Only 3 people had accessed that floor during the window. 1 janitor, 1 night nurse, and Dr. Logan Patel, a second-year resident, ambitious, quiet, always asking to shadow me more often. I remembered how often he offered to clean up the files after surgeries, how he always volunteered to log post-op notes into the system. I made a note of his name. Then I moved on. The anonymous complaint about behavioral misconduct. It was vague, but I recognized the phrasing. It sounded eerily similar to something Melissa Cohen had said during our budget argument. He thinks he's untouchable because of his outcomes. Maybe someone needs to remind him that he's not. There was no proof yet. But I didn't need proof today. I needed a pattern. And by Thursday, I had one. I wasn't just being pushed out. I was being erased. They were creating a paper trail, one step at a time, to make it look like my fall was inevitable. But here's the mistake they made. They underestimated what a quiet man can hear when he stops talking. And I had stopped talking completely. Instead, I hired Maya Tran, a former malpractice investigator turned private consultant. Brilliant, ruthless, and most importantly, discreet. I handed her a folder. Melissa Cohen, Logan Patel, and anyone who's logged into the system under my credentials in the last 6 months. She raised an eyebrow. You're not filing a claim? Not yet. What are you doing? I looked her dead in the eye. Setting the trap. Maya Tran worked as she always did, quietly and methodically. Within 3 days, she came back to me with 3 names. Logan Patel, yes, he was at the center of the unauthorized system access. But he wasn't acting alone. The second name? Melissa Cohen. No surprise there. But what Maya uncovered still managed to shake me. Melissa had founded a consulting firm, Westview Med Consult. On paper, it looked harmless. Data analysis and digital compliance services. But in the last 4 months, the company had received $145,000 in payments from our hospital. And the signatures? All authorized by Dr. Daniel Kern, our CFO. You know, my supposed friend. The man who once cried in my office, pretending we were brothers in arms. The third name was even worse. Elaine Russo, Director of Human Resources, the same woman who signed my administrative leave letter with that cold, unreadable face. Turns out she was the one who gave Westview full back-end access. She uploaded the documents. She rerouted the financials. And now the full picture was clear. Westview was the back door. A silent exit strategy. A sabotage operation that manipulated patient records, erased credentials, and, ultimately, positioned them to take control of the hospital for their own gain. The more silent I became, the louder they got. The more I stepped back, the more ground they took. But I wasn't staying silent any longer. That night, I found my old portable hard drive at home. The internal audit logs I'd started compiling years ago, still there. Staff complaints, post-op success rates, system change logs down to the second, and maybe most importantly, a disciplinary report from 2019. Melissa Cohen had been flagged by the ethics board. It was buried, swept under the rug. But I hadn't forgotten. The next morning, I called Maya. We're moving to phase 2. Walk me through it, she said. What's the goal? I looked her straight in the eye. My goal, I said, is to flip the entire table. Not so no one's left standing. I paused, but so no one ever looks down on me again. Maya Tran worked quietly but surgically. Within 3 days, she came back with 3 names. The first? Logan Patel. No surprise there. He was the digital ghost inside our system. But he wasn't acting alone. The second name nearly made me laugh. Melissa Cohen, of course. But Maya didn't just confirm my suspicions, she gave me fire. Melissa had launched a consultancy firm last year, Westview Med Consult. On paper, it looked clean. Data compliance and digital optimization services, it claimed. In reality, it was a funnel, and the hospital had paid it $145,000 over the past 4 months. Each payment was authorized by none other than Dr. Daniel Kern, our CFO. The same man who once cried in my office after a malpractice scare. The man I trusted. And then came the third name, Elaine Russo, our HR director. The same woman who handed me that suspension letter with ice in her eyes. Turns out, Elaine had set up most of Westview's internal access, admin credentials, VPN pathways, masked invoices. She was the one who opened the door. The full picture was now in focus. Westview wasn't a company. It was a weapon. They'd built a backdoor operation. Tamper with credentialing records. Modify patient case outcomes. Paint me as unstable, unethical. Remove me from power and absorb the vacuum I left behind. All while smiling at me in meetings. All while making me believe it was just HR protocol and temporary audit procedures. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were trying to replace me with a narrative they could control. That night, I dusted off a hard drive from my closet. It held everything. I had kept logs for years, quiet notes, system change alerts, internal complaints, flagged malpractice claims, things no one thought I paid attention to. And in there, buried deep, I found it. A sealed disciplinary case from 2019. Melissa Cohen had been formally warned by the hospital's ethics committee. The charge? Misrepresentation of clinical data in a billing cycle. It was hushed up at the time, swept away to protect her career. But I remembered. The next morning, I called Maya. We're moving to phase 2. She didn't hesitate. What's the objective? I paused. My objective, I said, isn't just to clear my name. She waited. It's to flip the entire table and make damn sure no one stands taller than me again. Maya and I met in a quiet corner booth of a Vietnamese cafe on Sunset. She slid a folder across the table. Encrypted logs, internal Slack messages, Kern's financial access history, and... She paused, a half-smile forming. Melissa's laptop backups. She's terrible at deleting anything. Inside the folder, I found a chat log, dated 3 days before my suspension. Melissa. He has no idea, still thinks it's just admin review. Logan. His credentials will be revoked by Monday. Elaine's pulling the file today. Melissa. By Q4, I want his patient load absorbed into Westview. Kern's already drafted the plan. They weren't just conspiring. They were executing. With precision, with malice, and with a timeline. I looked up at Maya. You're sure this is clean? She raised an eyebrow. It's not admissible in court. Yet. But it's enough to start fires. That was all I needed. The following night, I emailed 3 anonymous tips. One to the California State Medical Board, attaching anonymized versions of the altered billing cycles. One to a medical journalist I knew at the Los Angeles Times. And one, just one, to Daniel Kern's personal assistant, marked confidential and containing a single line. Check Westview's fourth quarter accounts. You're listed as an officer. It was a bluff, but in the world of corruption, a bluff could be louder than truth. 48 hours later, the first domino fell. Kern resigned, citing personal reasons. But behind the scenes, Maya confirmed that a forensic audit had started. Internal IT flagged 4 anomalies. HR locked Melissa's access pending review. And as for Elaine Russo, she panicked. How do I know? Because I got an email from her. Sent at 3:17 a.m. Subject line. Can we talk? Body. You've made your point. I think it's time we sit down. This isn't helping anyone." I didn't respond. Instead, I sent Maya a 2-word message. "Go public." She knew what that meant. By dawn, a redacted whistleblower report appeared online. Posted by an anonymous hospital staffer, it contained screenshots of tampered patient files, evidence of false credentialing reports, a payment trail from Westview to Kern's private consulting fund, a timeline of when I was suspended, correlating exactly with an internal bid to privatize several hospital departments. It didn't name names. But it didn't have to. The industry reads between the lines. By noon, 3 major healthcare blogs picked up the story. By dinner, a podcast was already dissecting the Westview scheme. And by morning, my phone lit up with texts from former colleagues. "You were right. Melissa's gone. They're unraveling." I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. Not victory, not relief. Control. I had seized it back, and I wasn't finished. By the following Monday, a full internal investigation had been launched, but no official statement had been made, which told me one thing. They were scrambling. Hospitals don't like scandal, especially not when it threatens accreditation, investor confidence, or insurance partnerships. And so, when I got a call from the hospital board's liaison, I wasn't surprised. "Dr. Mercer, the board would like to invite you to a closed-door session next week. Off the record. No press." I paused, then asked, "Will Melissa Cohen be in the room?" A long silence followed. "Numbers, she's been placed on administrative leave." I almost laughed. "I'll be there." But I wasn't just going to attend. I was going to orchestrate. In the week leading up to the meeting, I worked with Maya to prepare a confidential package. One that included a timeline of my wrongful suspension, chain of command inconsistencies metadata from Westview's fund transfers, a brief statement outlining how these actions violated state and federal healthcare compliance statutes. But I left out one thing, the final nail, because I hadn't used it yet. The board meeting took place in a sterile, glass-walled conference room. Everyone looked uncomfortable. I wore a black suit and carried nothing but a USB drive. After the introductions and legal disclaimers, one of the board members, a former surgeon named Dr. Hollis, leaned forward. "Dr. Mercer, we've reviewed your materials. They're troubling. But the burden of proof is substantial. Do you have anything else?" I slid the USB across the table. "I do." They inserted it into the boardroom system. A video loaded. It was footage. Security cam logs Maya had retrieved from Melissa's Westview office. It showed a whiteboard timeline titled Mercer Transition Plan. Kern and Melissa reviewing charts labeled Handoff Phase 2. And finally, Melissa on a recorded Zoom call with Jeremy Whitmore, CEO of a private equity group known for buying out hospital departments. In the call, she says, "Once Mercer's out of the way, Westview handles all compliance. We've already pulled the plug on his access. He's practically gone." The room went silent. Someone exhaled audibly. Dr. Hollis looked at me with something between shame and awe. "You're not just fighting back," he said. "You're setting the rules." I stood up. I was a doctor here for nearly a decade. I served patients, led teams, taught residents. And you let them erase me with a signature. I turned to the door. I'm not looking for a job back. I'm looking for accountability. And then I left. Not in anger, but in full, measured silence. That night, I walked the streets of Pasadena, city lights flickering like static in my periphery. Maya called. "They're issuing a statement. Full compliance audit. Melissa's out. Kern's being subpoenaed. Elaine? Off the radar. Probably lawyered up." I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just asked, "Are the files secure?" She replied, "Triple encrypted, cloud mirrored, and backed up in Switzerland." I nodded to no one. The chessboard was clear, and I still had pieces left to play. 3 days after the board meeting, I received an email. Not from the hospital, not from legal, not from anyone I expected. It was from Channel 9 Investigates. Dr. Mercer, we've been tipped off to a potential internal corruption scheme involving Westview Med Consult. Your name came up. Would you be open to an off-the-record conversation? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I forwarded the email to Maya. 10 minutes later, she called. "They got it from one of the finance team whistleblowers," she said. "Word is, someone from legal leaked a piece of your presentation to protect their own name." Good. That meant the infection was spreading, and I was the pathogen. I met the reporter, Lexi Tron, at a bookstore cafe in Silver Lake. She was sharp, mid-30s, the kind of journalist who knew the power of silence. I handed her a flash drive. "Everything on here is public domain or leaked anonymously. I'm not the story. The system is." She raised an eyebrow. "You realize if this goes live, the fallout won't be quiet." "I'm counting on that." The story aired 6 nights later. PR spin failed instantly. Headlines blazed across Los Angeles. Private equity web in LA hospital network exposed. Doctor wrongfully suspended during takeover plot. Anonymous sources detail Westview Med Consult conspiracy. Within 48 hours, Melissa Cohen's house was raided. Kern resigned with a medical leave excuse. Elaine Russo's name was quietly removed from HR records. And me? I sat in my apartment, watching the entire tower collapse like a slow-motion implosion. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. But it felt like progress. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak on a national health ethics panel. The email read, "We'd like your perspective on corporate influence in clinical settings. No cameras, no press, just physicians and policy voices." I agreed, because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about memory and legacy. At the panel, someone asked me a question. "Why didn't you sue?" "You had the documents, the motive." The damage, I answered simply, "Because lawsuits close doors. I wanted the doors kicked open." Later that night, I got a voicemail from Emily. "I just saw the piece. Dad and we didn't know. We should have asked questions. I'm sorry, David." I didn't call back, not right away, but I saved the message. Sometimes silence is punishment, and sometimes it's the beginning of consequences. 6 weeks after the Westview story broke, subpoenas started flying like confetti. Melissa Cohen was indicted on 2 counts of wire fraud and misappropriation of hospital funds. She pleaded not guilty. Daniel Kern's name appeared in the 2nd round of federal filings. The charge, conspiracy to defraud a federally funded institution. And Elaine Russo? Well, the HR director who once handed me a suspension letter with ice in her eyes suddenly needed a criminal defense attorney. She reached out through a mutual contact. "Elaine would like to talk. Privately. She's worried." I declined. If she wanted leniency, she could earn it the old-fashioned way, by flipping on her co-conspirators. And she did. Meanwhile, I kept working. Not at St. Charles. That chapter was closed. Instead, I started consulting, quietly, with an independent oversight committee investigating private equity infiltration in public hospitals. They called it the Mercer Clause, a recommendation buried in HR reform policy that protected physicians from non-clinical retaliation. Irony. That was my revenge, turning my name into a protection measure. And then came the settlement offer. From the hospital's new board, now scrambling to salvage its image. 6 pages. Legalese dressed as an apology. $950,000 in damages. A formal statement exonerating me of all wrongdoing. A quiet promise to restructure the vendor approval process. But what struck me most was the last line. We recognize the courage it took to bring this matter forward. I read it twice. Not because I believed it, but because I wanted to remember what it looked like when power blinked first. That night, I stood outside the hospital where it all started. Just for a moment. Patients still walked through those sliding glass doors. Nurses still smoked behind the service ramp. And the faint buzz of fluorescent lights still hummed from the lobby. The building hadn't changed, but I had. I walked away without looking back. Now, a year later, I teach medical ethics part-time. I don't need the money. I do it because someone once told me stories are how we survive betrayal. Not by forgetting, but by remembering out loud, so the next target knows how to fight back. And Lisa? She left Jeremy 6 months after his indictment. Tried to reach out once. I blocked the number. Because some things don't get patched. Some fractures become boundaries. And the final piece? A handwritten letter I keep in my drawer. From a third-year resident who watched the story unfold and chose to stay in medicine because of it. I thought we were just pawns. But you reminded me, we can also be players. That's enough for me. Because revenge doesn't always come with fire. Sometimes it comes with clarity. What about you? If you were in my place, would you have walked away? Or burned it all to the ground?